So I'd like to start with a tribute to my postgraduate student, Octavia Swazi Mapalala, who made this project not only successful, but a delightful experience. She was fluent in Siswati, the language of Eswatini. Her warmth, enthusiasm, and sensitivity, to local norms made working with the local community easy. Swazi was passionate about her work, and her dedicated transcription from Siswati to English of hours of interviews means that I too can share in the words that she heard and present this work to you today. This project was made possible because of my close collaboration with Swazi and Ngeti Masugu, who's the local community guide. Today's talk is about a project I started in the Kingdom of Eswatini in 2017 at the public rock art site of Nsangwini, a small chiefdom in northern Eswatini. I want to start with this quote from a local community member as it captures their appreciation of the site as an asset that benefits them and one which they will guard. So to quote, "The money received from the tourists benefit the community of Nsangwini only, not Nsangwini or Pikes Peak. So the community with the drawings is the one that benefits from it." I arrived to work at the Rock Art Research Institute as a fresh PhD graduate in 2002. I mention this because my memory of this time was of a euphoric period, both for the Archaeology Division and the Rock Art Research Institute at Wits University. The Institute had been instrumental in the opening of the two public rock art sites of Wildebeestkerk and Camberg, with large capital expenditure and the promise of uplifting the local communities at these sites. The Origin Centre was under construction and the President of South Africa came to open it. It was a time of celebration and hope. I then watched over the years as this optimism eroded. In later years, I served on the Rock Art Trust with Raphael and Mr. Duma, overseeing the Camberg Rock Art Centre, and experienced the tensions and the disappointment of the local community when profits and jobs didn't materialize. The paint cracked, tourist films ceased to play, and the vision eroded. I first visited Nsangwini rock art site as a tourist with my family in 2015, and it immediately caught my interest. I was curious as to how it ran and was struck by how different it was to public rock art sites I had visited in South Africa. This is the first time I met the guide Ngeti Masuku, who has worked here since 2012. I was struck by the fact that this community of Swazis, descendants of Bantu language-speaking farmers, were both protecting and marketing this hunter-gatherer rock art site without any apparent indigenous spiritual beliefs about the site, nor any ancestral connections to the artists. Southern Africanist researchers working at other sites have found that living heritage with spiritual and ancestral connections between a local community and a rock art site may or may not protect the site, as we've seen in the presentations. And that's protect in the sense of the Western management system. So the important point with this site is that the local community do not think of this site as sacred. And so this is just to recognize some of the work that's influenced my thinking about this. Some of you are in the audience, just very quickly. So in contrast to South African public rock art sites, Nsangwini is running successfully. So when you're talking about success, you have to define it. And so this is the way we thought about it, that it's success if the site is open and it's running and the visitors are having a good experience, and if the community feel that they're benefiting from the site. And whilst doing so, the site is protected and conserved. And the community feels that their connection to that site is not severed. So in Nsangwini, there's a tiny dot in the map of Swaziland. I don't know if you can see it, but clearer on this other drawing. So this is the name of a small community within which the rock art site is found. They have a local chief and a headquarters centered at the Royal Kraal. The site opened to tourists in about 2004 or 2005. We're not sure from interviews, with the building of a reception and the employment of a guide. And it's been running ever since. So just this is a quote from another local community member just talking about who set the site up. So in this picture, just to talk briefly, there's the road that you drive up to approach the site. There's a reception there, and then you walk 10 to 15 minutes down the hill, and the site is in a small open view of the Komati River. And then just another, this is important because one of the points I want to make later is the proximity of the guide's home to the visitor parking. Any tourist that comes to the site, the guide can see from her home. The Swazis call it locally Embalweni, the place of writings. And just to show you the sort of rock art, it's typical hunter-gatherer rock art, most of it monochrome, some winged therianthropes, and then in the other picture at the top there are some fat-tailed sheep, which would put those paintings within the last 2,000 years. So Mason was one of the first archaeologists to visit the site after meeting a man from Nsangwini who told him about the paintings. Interest in the site and its protection then prompted the chief of the time to fence the site in 1967, and visits to the site were possible by acquiring the key from the chief. In January 2004, Benjamin Smith from the Rock Art Research Institute visited the site with a group of honours students, and he wrote a management plan which includes a development plan for the construction of a visitors centre and the opening of the site to tourists. But nothing further came from that plan. But later in that year or the following year, the dates, it's either 2004, 2005, the local community formally opened the site to tourists. So there's a connection. They were obviously, I think, influenced by people coming to the area and showing interest in the rock art. A few words about how the site runs. The site tour guide is selected by the Rock Art Management Committee in consultation with the Chief's Council after the positions are advertised by word of mouth amongst the Nsangwini community. All income generated from tourist visits is held by the committee. The only money the site raises is through ticket sales. A portion of the ticket sales goes to the guide and the rest is spent within the community. The site is run with the permission of the Eswatini Tourist Authority and the Eswatini National Trust Commission. So interviews were carried out in March and July 2018, and a total of 2 group interviews and 11 one-on-one interviews. All of them were made in Siswati, and we chose to interview older community members, both men and women. Most of the interviews were conducted at the Royal Kraal Meeting Hall, as this is the place where the Nsangwini community meet regularly. So on to my findings, our findings. Not a single interview revealed any indigenous belief or spiritual connection with that site. Everyone interviewed recognized the art was made by hunter-gatherers in the past and that they was distinct from the Swazi. Everyone interviewed mentioned the economic value of the site to the community. Most of the interviewees also valued the site for the culture it represented. They drew parallels between heritage that is traditionally important to Swazis and the rock art. And I'll illustrate this with some quotes from the interviews. Now, I know you're not going to have time. We can't go through them all, but I'll just read out one. So I've just called this slide Seeing Differences because it's about the Swazi being different to the painters. I know what is painted there. Animals, so these are all quotes from the local community. Animals, human-like images, and Bushman images. These paintings are what was left behind by the Bushmen. As for them, I do not know them. And then on to the economic value of the site. It is a beautiful thing for the community. I heard reports from far that they brought traditional attires for some people who were going to the King's Kraal, and now there is a child who is vulnerable, and they want to pay their fees. I find this relationship with the rock art really interesting. So there were many other things, but I've selected ochre. Yes, the use of ochre. The Bushmen used to use it, and Swazi people also use it when marrying a wife. That was taken from the Bushmen. The Swazi people, once you're smeared with ochre, it is said that it stays forever and does not get removed. And the Bushmen painted using ochre, which has lasted. So why is Nsangwini successful, and are there lessons learned from this that might be applied to other similar ventures? I want to start off with 2 points that I think are applicable in most contexts. So this slide shows the budget from the management plan, and when the idea was that they were going to open a visitor centre. And you can see the setup would have, and this is from 2004, the setup was going to be around about 400,000 Rand, and then there'd be an annual running cost of 35,000 Rand. Now, the reality is that the site was set up with local labor, and it doesn't cost anything to run except local labor. So I think it would be good, and I think academics have some responsibility here to have small-scale projects, 0 to small startup funds. Keep expectations low amongst the local community. And by low, we're really meaning realistic, because as Raphael's talk illustrated, it's really hard sometimes to get tourists to sites. So I've also put up these pictures taken from different years because they demonstrate nicely how the community is in charge. So when the site gets broken down after a heavy storm, as in 2023, they can rebuild it themselves. They don't have to wait for budget clearance and all that stuff. And so I asked the guide as I was writing this in the last few days to send me a recent picture, and there you can see it's renovated. So now I'm going to move on to context-specific advantages of Nsangwini by virtue of it being in Eswatini. Many of these will not be applicable in South Africa because of its long history of the oppression of indigenous communities, which severed them from their land and broke down the traditional fabric of these communities. So here's a map of Eswatini, and you can see it's made up of 55 tinkundla. These are all the different colors, which are sort of traditional administrative centers. Amongst those 55 tinkundla, they're further broken down. So Swaziland, Eswatini, has a total of 385 chiefdoms. And if you look at Pig's Peak right at the top in yellow, where Nsangwini is, in that small area, there are 6 chiefdoms. And at Nsangwini, every week, the Chiefs Council, which is 10 community members elected, sit and meet any member of the community to settle disputes, anything that they raise, twice a week. The community living around the site are all Swazi, almost all. And that helps in the running of this. It's community-led and run. Importantly, I think it provides non-essential income because these are generally subsistence farmers. And another thing that came out in the interviews is that Swazis have a really good school curriculum in terms of archaeology and history. These quotes are too long for now, but I just want you to believe me that it came out strongly. And I've also got, you can see that in the syllabus of Swaziland, where I went to school, there's been a long there's been a long appreciation of Swaziland and its history and Southern African history, going back, way back. What also came out in the interviews is that the Swazi community themselves are starting to think that they want to include their own culture now in this tourism offering. So they're already seeing the potential. So, for example, the traditional flooring and the grindstone are the Swazis putting a bit of their culture into the experience. Everything is made with local knowledge and local material and local labor. It really works because the guide can be at home, planting in her field, doing things around the house. And if a tourist comes, she can go and take them on the tour. The other thing that Eswatini does very well is marketing. And it's a small country. When you cross the border, wherever you stay in Swaziland, you get every month, they publish this paper, What's Happening, and it always covers all the cultural tourist sites. Once a year, they also produce this glossy brochure, and you can see that there's been a long appreciation for heritage from this first day cover from 1977. So to conclude, 2 slides. So I think it works because Nsangwini is small scale, community driven and rooted in existing local structures rather than imposed on from outside or made dependent on tourism as their only livelihood. The site is managed through legitimate traditional governance. The guide is chosen by the Rock Art Committee and the Chiefs Council. Incomes managed locally. This builds trust, transparency and accountability. There is a cohesive, clearly defined community with strong customary systems for decision-making and conflict resolution. The initiatives build on local knowledge and education. As I've said, archaeology and history are in the school curriculum. I'll leave that. Go on to the next one. So broader lessons, I think, possibly, for other sites in Africa. Start small and keep budgets and expectations realistic and then grow gradually. Anchor projects in traditional institutions and let communities lead decision-making and benefit sharing. Treat tourism income as a complement, not the community's only safety net. Invest in education and interpretation so that people understand the history and the meaning of the place. Use indigenous and local labor in infrastructure and management to reduce costs and strengthen ownership. Connect rock art to living culture. This is what's happening amongst this community now. Thank you.
First question by Louis.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I think your presentation is an example of a living heritage. The community you mentioned, they are living their heritage. The government is also benefiting from that heritage. But my main interest is on the application of that red stuff. Is it ochre or what? I don't know how to. Yeah, the ochre. Is it giving you problems more so that it's people associated with the application of it was used during rock art? So is it not giving you problems with or new paintings? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. What I see that it does is actually when you speak to the Swazis, they respect the rock art as not their thing and distinct from them. They don't want to go and paint. Ochre is for them and their cultural traditions, specifically for marriage and ancestral rituals. And so this doesn't even seem to cross anyone's mind.
Question by Shanti.
Thank you so much. I couldn't keep quiet on this one because I think my study that I've also done for my master's actually focuses on looking at community engagements and so forth. So I just have one simple question. In terms of that side, would you say that traditional custodianship management systems are best and are also sustainable for the site? And also what recommendations would you also maybe or lessons or pointers that you would give to maybe other sites to actually adopt? Because from what I'm getting is that you're adopting a traditional system of managing the site or maybe running the site. So maybe what would you advise to other sites like that? Because I mean, that's like a small site. If you had now put Wildebeest scale in your mind, what would you relay from this specific study?
I mean, firstly, it's not me doing anything in terms of telling the community what to do. I'm just there observing what they have done, right? So yes, what they are doing is close to what we could call a traditional management system because they are running the site themselves within their traditional structures. So I don't know what to advise for sites like Wildebeest scale. They're really complicated. Yeah. So this is just, I mean, what is so lovely about this is it's working, I think, and you can see the reasons it's working, I think, but I can't really, I don't know for Wildebeest scale. I think it's very different.
There's a question here.
Thank you. My question is on the visitorship. It doesn't clear to me how many people come per year. What's the actual financial returns? And but I appreciate especially your thought on people starting being realistic, because what I see in parts of Botswana where we've been is that sometimes the government spends so much money, and then sometimes it's an encouragement, a startup of some kind, but then from there things are just going to go down because it's not sustainable. You know, what's been put there is not sustainable in terms of infrastructure, you know, maintenance and stuff like that. And so, and then other communities out there, they think, oh, government did something that side, they must do something for us too. When that first thing didn't even has no, you know, success, you know, story. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. In terms of visitor numbers, they're very low, especially after COVID. I think lots of the tour operators, particularly of European tourists, their routes changed a bit, and I think the site has suffered. So I can only speak about now, and I spoke to the guide. So in the last 2 months, there were only something like 20 visitors to the site, and each time a visitor goes to the site, an adult is charged 50 Rand for a visit. But that's where my point is, that this works when this income is a bonus for the community. Yeah, not when they're relying on it.
Okay, mine is very small, but I think importance in terms of decolonial work that we talk about. I think there was a slide where you interviewed, or there was an interview of a person and was referred to as a local community interview, and then also local community member. I think it would be more nice to put their names.
Can't do that, sorry. We're not allowed, because of the ethics clearance, like I can name the woman I work with closely, she's given me permission. I'm not allowed to give names for all my other interviews according to my ethics clearance.
Question from Julie.
Just linking to what the question about Wildebeest scale. And sorry if I missed this, but from what I can gather from what you're saying, it's quite a small community. Maybe you can say something more about the size of the community. I would guess they're kind of related, maybe because I think that's one of the problems that with once a community gets bigger, these things get more difficult. And when there's limited resources in communities like Wildebeestskale or even the Komani, you actually have communities that are not really in unison and don't necessarily have the same desires. But yeah, maybe you can just say a wee bit more about the makeup of the community.
So the community, one of the strong points and why I think it's successful is that they're largely Swazis, and it's a small community of about 6,000 people.
Last question.
I just wanted to say thank you so very much for your presentation. It's just phenomenal. My question is, do you think, I mean, I'm also now looking at Wildebeestskale and that I know quite intimately so the Swati people and those from Wildebeestskale involved there, like Koning Tier that's sitting right here. So my question is to you, if you look at the governmental structure or the traditional structure there, would that not be a place to start? Because the recognition, it seems, and you knowing coming from there, possibly know whether those chiefs are all recognized or allowed to actually perform as the leaders of the communities, while here it seems a little different. Perhaps you could just just expand on that a little, if you don't mind.
I mean, absolutely, the chiefs are performing. It's a kingdom, and the chiefs then are reporting to the king ultimately. And I know Eswatini gets a lot of bad press because the king is not such a good guy, but actually the traditional governance and the systems and the structures are absolutely amazing because everyone has a voice. And the voice gets passed up through traditional structures and ultimately get to the king. So I think it's a beautiful system.